In study after study, money is often cited as one of the top conflict points in a marriage. Finances can be an emotional topic for couples, especially when money is tight. So it pays to get in the habit of discussing it on a regular basis, even if you keep separate finances. At stcumoney.org, find 6 tips for making the conversation easier.
Welcome to Let's Talk Spokane, where host Ryan McNeese seeks out and discusses the latest on a variety of hot local topics. Now, here's your host, Ryan McNeese.
Welcome to Business Talks. I'm Ryan McNeese, and we're here in the studio with Dave Krygier of DMK Productions, producer, director, copywriter, storyteller. Welcome to the studio.
Well, thank you for having me, Ryan.
Dave,
glad to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. We've got a lot of ground to cover today. You handle this industry from a lot of different angles, and it's interesting to me. Let's start off by saying, 'cause I think we can work our way backwards. New book coming out. We got it right here, 30 Years into 6, A Marketer's Journey Through the Small Business Jungle. The reason I'd want to start with the book is I think that, in my opinion, is an aggregate of many, many things that you've brought to the table and what you do as a storyteller. Maybe start and tell us a little bit about the book, and then we'll maybe go full circle how you got here.
Well, about 2 years ago, I had been wrapping up about 6 years of blogging. And that was about 30 years and my experiences and things we had done and testing and working with clients.
Trial and error.
Trial and error.
Right.
And so we took that and basically combined all different blog articles, things that we had worked on since 2010 January.
Right.
And basically I brought it into the book, had my editor dig into it. And
so really a compilation of your learning lessons within the small business realm.
Yeah, it's all about small business and the different topics of marketing and advertising and promotion and everything that it takes, and that I had experienced.
Well, I think that's so important. I'd encourage folks to check this out. I'm going to get an opportunity to reread it as well. The old adage, why recreate the wheel? It's so true in business because you can spend so many resources trying to go figure out how to do each of these items that you've been blogging about for years, but you get a book like this and you read it all and say, okay, I think I'll go this direction or this direction, but you might get there a lot more quickly than you would if you'd tried each on your own. So I certainly appreciate that type of knowledge.
Yeah, it's so true. When I was working on this and editing and culling down all the different topics, these were all experiences and things we had gone through, both on our own and dealing with clients. And it was kind of amazing going back and looking at the time frames because some of this dated back into the 90s and the 80s.
Which, good point, was a different world in terms of marketing, in terms of technology, the use of that technology for marketing purposes. So when you were aggregating, or as you said, culling this information, was it interesting to see maybe what you were talking about on a regular basis in 1998 versus 2008 versus 2012?
Oh, very much so. So in 1996, I had U.S. West Direct back then, did a case study on me because I had been testing to see if their ads work. And, this is 1996, and we had gotten on the web the year before, and we were testing
World Wide Web.
The World Wide Web, August of 1995. And you look at the change today that, the Yellow Page book is about this big now.
Right.
So we're able to do so many more things that we couldn't do back then. And it's changed so
immensely.
Much. Yeah.
Well, and the technology that you would have used to produce the content, because at the basis of what you do, you're content provider, storyteller, content, and then a way to deliver that content is what you're a professional at doing. You brought a device here into the studio today. Tell us about this technology, because we all know, whether it be production business, broadcast business, the technology aspect, it's expensive.
It is.
Tell us about what you got here.
This has enabled us to basically create content utilizing a custom GoPro with custom mounted lenses. This is a Nikon professional camera with a cinema lens. And what we're able to do with this technology today, compared to 5 and 10 and 20 years ago, is really amazing.
Well, just alone what you're describing there, the way you have the GoPro attached, and knowing most folks know what GoPros can do, pretty diverse photography and filming, pretty amazing. Let's circle back. We've been talking about you've had the ability to put together all of this information into the book here in the present time. Let's go back even to the 80s. How did you get into this business? What was the impetus that sparked your interest to say, I want to be in this type of business?
So in the 80s, I was in the music business.
Okay.
And
you could probably talk about that most of the show alone.
Yeah, I was in the music business. Lots of great stories.
Yeah.
And that kind of led to being in the back end of the business, which was recording, live sound, lighting, sound stages, everything to do with the entertainment, the tech aspect. And that eventually led to marketing in an agency that was doing special events and marketing. And essentially that whole creative thrust from working in the music industry and being in the back end kind of led me to the agency business, marketing, and then doing voiceover work and radio commercials and jingles and all kinds of creative endeavors.
Well, a couple things I find interesting there is it's uncanny how many folks you talk to in film, in theater, in marketing that maybe were out in front of the camera or on the stage, but because of that experience, like you're explaining, learn the back end, which most people don't realize how much goes into the back end of producing theater, film, marketing, content, etc. And I think that's your storyline too, that I believe you're a child actor in New York.
Yeah, I did some acting as a kid, from the school side of it to some college as a child, and that led me to doing other things.
I think it puts you in a unique position behind the camera to understand your client.
Yes.
And what your client's trying to maybe portray, you're able to assist and direct and produce in a much more tangible fashion.
Well, and the perspective today, when we talk about content, is not just, say, video.
Right.
It's the audio that's with the video. It's the words that may go along with the pictures.
Yep.
It's the photo stills. It's this whole package.
All of it telling the story.
Correct.
In its unique way.
Yes, very much so.
I don't want to embarrass you and make you do a voiceover, but if you're a professional at that, you probably can do a couple.
We'll have to see about that. Yes, we will.
Oh, my gosh. And I think I understood. What about Ziggy's? People in this area got to know Ziggy's.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, probably 15, 16 years ago. And that was
I think it was something like this.
Thank you. I won't make you keep going, but that is yet another thing that's interesting about the production film theater world, that folks don't realize how many folks behind the scenes are doing voiceover. It's a career unto itself.
It is.
And you did a bit of that as well, obviously. As you progressed through the 80s, you were involved in the music industry, which then led you into marketing and more to the tech side. Some of that, I recall, you were in Seattle.
Yes.
What brought you to Spokane?
So exactly 10 years ago tomorrow, we moved here to Spokane. And we had some family that had moved here, and we wanted to get back into eastern Washington. We lived in Wenatchee, and we're tired of the gray and the rain and the traffic in Seattle.
Right.
So we picked Spokane.
How's it going 10 years in?
We love it here.
Well, and that's a bit of a segue potentially to some of your clients that you've served, and I know from the feedback we get, served well. One of them is West Plains Chamber.
Yes.
That's somebody that would definitely be promoting our area and why folks should be in our area and continue to thrive and do business here in the Spokane region. Tell us maybe what you can about what a client like that's promoting Spokane, what are their needs in terms of storytelling, content, video, photography, et cetera?
Well, it's all about the members with the chamber or an association.
Sure.
And it's telling the story so other members and then potential new members, because they can understand
and want to associate with that.
Exactly.
Okay.
More about what's that business really about.
All right.
And so it's telling that story about that business owner, business manager, the partners. What do they do? What's it like being there?
Right.
What's the business about?
Well, and I've had the luxury, and I would encourage others to do the same. I've had the luxury of following many of your different social media platforms and what you've done for the chamber and other clients, and the quality of the productions that you're doing really is very, very professional, and the quality in terms of an HD quality presentation. It's impressive.
Well, thank you very much.
Tell us maybe a handful of projects that you've worked on historically that really stand out to you, that really told you something you really enjoyed working on. It brought all of the elements of your business background into a project.
Well, one of the latest projects we worked on was the Best of the West. We did basically all the initial filming for it, going up to the awards, and then we actually did the production there at Northern Quest for the night of the awards. So that was a big project. One of the funnest projects we recently worked on was with Tom Sawyer, Chris Patati. There.
Tom Sawyer Coffee. Well, my gosh, I got their coffee right here.
There we go. Yeah, that was a very, very fun project, shooting.
And both those guys, Tom Sawyer and Chris, wonderful guys.
Yeah,
guys.
love working with them, and it was just such a blast.
They're passionate about what they do.
Yeah, very, very much so.
So how do you approach a project like that? In that case, you have two individuals that are perfectly willing to work with you and be creative and maybe work alongside you. How does that type of project come together in terms of creating the content?
So we approached that particular project where we were shooting 2 and 3 different cameras, doing both video, stills, and basically looking at it from the perspective of getting clips for social and for the website.
Sure, for different platforms.
For different platforms, exactly. So it was a camera, what we call a run and gun situation.
Right. No, that makes sense.
And we did a lot of interviews, and we approached it from stills. What could we do with stills when we shoot content? What could we get with the different camera angles? And then clips we could use almost immediately, and then clips that they could use for the future.
Well, and I think as you're describing, if you're using all these different angles and different media, then it comes down to the editing. And I think that's a professional and an art unto itself. Let's take a quick break and come right back to Business Talks and talk to Dave Krygier of DMK Productions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Money is often cited as one of the top conflict points in a marriage. Finances can be an emotional topic for couples, especially when money is tight. So it pays to get in the habit of discussing it on a regular basis, even if you keep separate finances. At stcumoney.org, find 6 tips for making the conversation easier.
Here's Rob Curley, editor of the Spokesman Review.
Living life is complicated. They should give you an instruction manual, but they don't. So every day I feel like I have to try to put together an instruction manual for how you would live in Eastern Washington. Sometimes that's big national news, sometimes it's local news, but sometimes it's just telling you where to get a good hamburger and why the Zag Zone really works this year.
Online, in print, the Spokesman Review. Subscribe to The Experience.
To help you be safe, Washington state law requires you to call 811 2 full business days before you plan, for example, to dig, drill, plow, pull from, or pound anything into the ground. Be prepared to provide the operator with the correct address, cross street, and a description of your work. You must mark the dig area with white paint. The operator will inform you of the utilities notified of your impending excavation. Wait for all their marks. Be safe and dig with care.
In touch, online all the time. SpokaneTalksOnline.com.
Welcome back to Business Talks. I'm Ryan McNeese, and we're here in the studio with Dave Krygier of DMK Productions. Thanks again, Dave. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me on the show.
At the core of what we've been talking about is you're a storyteller.
Yes.
We've talked about the technology. We can talk about social media platforms. We can talk about content, if you will, or the written word. But at the core, the description of what you really do when you bring it all together is you're a storyteller.
Correct.
But let's flesh out, what does that mean to you? And then, of course, what does that mean to your clients?
So storytelling, this is a profession that goes back into thousands of years. And today, it's putting together the story or stories for a client, or if we're doing it internally, that's really going to get the message when it really comes down to what the message is.
Right.
And how are we going to weave that together?
And what the message should be.
Right, exactly. And so when we tell a story, and there's lots of different ways to do that, whether it's through a book, whether it's through
still photography,
video, it could be through audio, like what we're doing, today. And so that's what it really comes down to, for me, because I was trying to come up with what we actually do. What do I do over the years? And I said, really, it's telling stories, right? No matter,
that's a good point.
Whether, like I said, whether we're on location, we're on a set, I'm here with you, and we're telling some kind of a story. There's all different ways to do that. And so we've kind of cultivated this process in what I do, whether I'm writing, whether I've got a still camera, whether it's a DSLR, whether it's a camera over the shoulder, a cinema camera, that we're always looking at how can we propel, how can we maximize that story.
I'm actually fascinated with how you're saying that, because the word that comes to me across different genres of business is delivery. How do you deliver the story? And whether it's in the legal profession or the magazine business or television business, or as we're talking about here in the production business and storytelling, how do you deliver that story?
Well, and that's really what it comes down to, is you have a percentage of the population that they listen and they learn through what they hear.
And not say.
They have a percentage of the population that they're going to read. They still love to read. You have a percentage of the population that they're looking at images, whether it's stills or motion. And so it's telling that story through those different mediums and being able to get through to those people.
No, absolutely, and cover the entire pie chart of those different ways of delivery.
Exactly.
What's your favorite way to tell the story? You are using all these different elements, and you are a professional in the content writing, producing, delivering content via technology, whether it be stills or video. What's your passion? What do you prefer the most? And again, I guess it depends on what the purpose is, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's a tough one, because, I went to school and was involved in audio and music, in the younger part of my life.
Right.
And so I love being in the studio. And if you said, what's the one thing you could do? I said, I could camp out in the studio, whether it's the film studio or the audio studio.
Right. It's the studio.
It's the studio.
The production, the technology, the back room.
Yeah, that's where I love to be.
Well, again, I think you've done a good job of describing how the different elements of really your life story, whether it be as a child actor on stage, whether it be doing voiceover, whether it be doing marketing or music. Let's face it, one piece that I find fascinating about business talks and the individuals that I have the opportunity to engage with is each of those elements usually, ironically, interestingly, leads the person to what they're doing now.
That's right.
And so when you really take the time to look back and say, when you're saying my passion is being in the studio, that really came from quite a while ago in your growth into these different areas. It's fascinating.
It did. And today, I love the entire picture. I'm just as happy with a camera on my shoulder. I'm just as happy in the control room behind an engineer.
Right.
I'm just as happy out in the field, slinging a boom pole with a mic on it. It's that whole process of creating and producing. And so I like all of it. And for that matter, I love sitting behind the computer or the tablet and just typing or talking away on a book.
I think it's the diversity. I think think you and I are saying the same thing in a sense that in the practice of law, I love being in the courtroom. I love the oral argument. But that doesn't mean you want to do that 7 days a week. I also really enjoy the writing and the client interaction and consulting and engaging with individuals, but at the same time, it's a lot of fun to step into court and kind of game time. And I think that's what you're describing as well, that being the lead on a production team, behind the camera, directing, or in the editing room offers that diversity.
Yes.
And let's face it, I know we've spoken, you're trying to be in a lot of places at one time. You have a lot of client needs, and you do a good job of checking those boxes. I think you got into Spokane 1 o'clock this morning from Seattle, being on a project.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you manage that busy schedule with your own personal time, but the needs and high demands of clients?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I learned from one of my mentors years ago how to do what we call action planning. And I learned this whole process to be able to maximize my time in these blocks and using action behind that. And so essentially it allows me to get and do a lot of things. I'm a multitasker, which many people are. So
you have to be in what you do.
So I learned how to do that and get a lot done and not waste time. And especially the time that I have, we only have so much time. That's the one thing. We only have this time. And I really learned how to do that. I learned and worked into being able to do lots of different things over the period of a day, but really putting things into action, versus what we call list management. So that was one of the things I learned.
Well, in looking at the plethora of items that you do for clients in that storytelling process, long list of experience that has gone into what you're providing in terms of content for clients, a lot that's gone into the book and advice. Where do you see yourself, if you look back over the last 30 years and then all that information that's been downloaded into you through experience, life experience, in terms of the book you've written as well, where are you going to be in 5 years, 10 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years with your production company? What would you like to see yourself doing?
I see us doing a lot more documentary work and really working on the stories behind people, because right now we're people, places, and products.
Right.
And building on content, telling the stories. But I see us doing a lot more documentary work, especially around the areas of when we talk about food and we talk about lifestyle and we talk about I call it the human story.
Right, the human nature.
Human nature, what makes people tick, why do they do what they do?
Well, I think that's why I'm so interested in your story, because I think I almost would have said it the same way, that you're capturing through that documentary process why people do what they do. Again, you said the human element or human nature. You're humanizing the story. I think anybody that likes documentaries would throw out Ken Burns and what we've seen through some of those magnificent stories. But I also think our market for the documentary has changed, such that the platforms, whether it be Netflix, On Demand, many of the platforms that produce or deliver those documentaries, I think that's coming into its own as well.
That's changed a lot, especially in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I think it has.
And it's allowed someone like myself, we're able to basically start producing a documentary, do the development work, put it into production, do the post-production, and be able to do it with tools like this.
Right.
And
cost effectiveness.
Very, very much so. Whereas 5-10 years ago, it just was cost prohibitive. You could do it, but it's not like it is today.
Well, there probably was quite a few elements of having to outsource that work potentially, not necessarily because of skill that you couldn't do it, but just because of the technology to do it.
Yes, and so the technology, that curve has come down. So the entry level is a lot easier, and it's a lot less money.
You can have all those pieces in your own studio.
For the most part, very much so. And so we look at that documentary process. We just launched one last week for Mosaic here in Spokane that was launched last Friday. And I look at the process for that and what we were able to do in somewhat of a short period of time. And when you look at that compared to what was 5 and 10 years ago, and what it would have cost us. Oh, hands down. And
that's a good point, though. What is the production cycle for like a feature-length movie in terms of when it's filmed versus post-editing, when it's distributed. It's probably, 2 years maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it can be, 12 months to 2 years. Some are even longer than that. Where with the documentary today, depending on the length and how involved it is in the travel schedules, if there's a lot of travel involved, there's a lot of variables, could be 3 to 6 months, depending on what the resources are.
And at a minimum, you could get that delivered even through mechanisms or platforms like a YouTube, let alone 2 different other buyers or other markets. But I'm really fascinated with the ability to not only create the product efficiently, cost effectively, but also to distribute it. That was the difference. That was the barrier to entry 20 years ago, if not even 15 years ago.
Well, and it's also that when you talk about, you have distribution, but then you talk about promotion.
Right.
And what you're able to do today on the promotion side, with social and the web, the barrier, again, has come down and allowed the common person to be able to promote their new film, their short, right, their music.
Right.
Whereas you couldn't do that. I mean, it was so much more money and so time intensive. Where today you're able to do that and you can get things out on social media almost instantaneously.
Right. But that, I think, we're really identifying what's so exciting about this time in technology, in production, excuse me, and the content that we've been talking about, or the storytelling. There are so many stories to be told here in our region, here in Spokane, certainly beyond. But the ability to tell those stories and capture the human nature of those stories, given that the technology is somewhat cost-effective, the production cost-effective, and as you've identified, the delivery of that product is effective. So it's exciting. It's exciting what we can do, I think, here in our community.
Well, so much, and there's so many great stories here in Spokane and the Inland Empire.
Right.
There's an enormous amount, and there's so many great businesses that people don't know what their story is.
That's right. Well, let's keep telling those stories.
That's
but
for
on
sure.
that note, where can people find you?
So they can find me at dmkproductions.co. There is no M on the end.
Okay.
dmkproductions.co. You can also find us on Instagram at DMK Productions. And then we're also on Vimeo and on LinkedIn.
Dave, I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us on Business Talks.
Thanks so much for having me today, Ryan.
Let's Talk Spokane is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask us a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. Thanks for listening.
If you're like many shoppers, you love to find a deal online. Or you shop online because it's so convenient. And you probably know thieves love to go online too, to try to steal shoppers' credit card information. When you're shopping online, you can start protecting your credit card information by investigating the website you're shopping on. Make sure the online retailer lists a real phone number and a physical address. Read the site's privacy policy and search for reviews and ratings of the retailer. You can read more about safe shopping online at STCU's financial education blog. Go to stcumoney.org.
Last year alone, Avista customers saved over 53 million kilowatt hours of energy by taking advantage of rebates from Avista. Like 15 cents a square foot for new attic insulation, $35 for installing a smart thermostat, or $2,300 for switching from electric to natural gas heat. And all that savings reduced carbon emissions by more than 18,000 tons. Way to save, everyone. Way to save. Find your way to save at AvistaUtilities.com.